In Washington yesterday, Donald Trump met with a group of America's most powerful CEOs, including Apple's Tim Cook and JP Morgan Chase's Jamie Dimon, according to CNBC's Andrew Ross Sorkin. Donald Trump left some of those who attended the meeting somewhat concerned.
I spoke to a number of CEOs who I would say walked into the meeting being Trump supporter-ish or thinking that they might be leaning that direction, who said that he was remarkably meandering, could not keep a straight thought, was all over the map, and that they, which may be not surprising, but was interesting to me because these were people who I think might have been actually predisposed to him and actually walked out of the room.
Now, here's the thing. We all know this. Donald Trump does not only meander in private. In fact, on the campaign trail, he often praises the fictional serial killer and cannibal Hannibal Lecter. And then on Sunday, he said this bizarrely.
What would happen if the boat sank from its weight and you're in the boat and you have this tremendously powerful battery and the battery's now underwater and there's a shark that's approximately 10 yards over there? By the way, a lot of shark attacks lately. Do you notice that? A lot of shark. So there's a shark 10 yards away from the boat, 10 yards. Or here, do I get electrocuted? If the boat is sinking, water goes over the battery, the boat is sinking. Do I stay on top of the boat and get electrocuted? Or do I jump over by the shark and not get electrocuted?
If I would have said that with a group of friends at a coffee shop here in Brooklyn or in New York, they would be very worried about me. But that's the Republican presidential nominee thinking out loud. Do I jump over by the shark and not get electrocuted? Is this a sit-down old man moment? I mean, after all, Trump is 78 today, or is this a symptom of an unwell mind that we should be all worried about as a country? I mean, there is a relationship between buffoonery and dictatorship. I mean, just look at this video released by North Korea. It's Kim Jong-un just last month. In 2015, during Donald Trump's first presidential campaign, when pundits argued about Trump's fitness, The Daily Show's Trevor Noah said Trump sounded a lot like Ugandan dictator Idi Amin, who took power in a coup and had hundreds of thousands of people killed.
Once you realize that Trump is basically the perfect African president, you start to notice the similarities everywhere.
I say not in a braggadocious way. I've made billions and billions of dollars.
I made a tremendous amount of money. I'm really rich.
I have a great temperament.
They love me anyway. I don't have to do this.
I've done an amazing job. I was born with a certain intellect. God helped me by giving me a certain brain.
Idi Amin, former president and best president of Uganda.
The people like me very much. I am very popular. I am very powerful. I am the one who has got the money. I have got a very good brain.
And it's not just Idi Amin. Mussolini was widely portrayed as a buffoon while ruling fascist Italy. A second-rate dictator who was bumbling and ineffectual. He still killed thousands of people and stayed in power for 2 decades. So what to make of the Trump gibberish? Tom Nichols in The Atlantic writes, I'm not a psychiatrist and I'm not diagnosing Trump with anything. I am, however, a man who has lived on this earth for more than 60 years, and I know someone who has serious emotional problems when I see them played out in front of me over and over. The 45th president is a disturbed person. He cannot be trusted with any position of responsibility, and especially not with a nuclear arsenal of more than 1,500 weapons. One wrong move could lead to global incineration. It's not just the top of the ticket. Democrats will spend big on down-ballot races this November, trying to stop the spread of Trumpism in state politics. The New York Times reports Democrats are poised to flood the country's most consequential state house and Senate elections with a spending blitz that will add up to 9 figures, showcasing the critical role state legislators play in some of the nation's most pressing issues and building on a cash advantage over Republicans. I could list for you examples to prove the damage Trump's brand of Republican politics has done at the local and state level across the country. But instead of a long list, I actually want to use one Colorado Republican as a case study. This is Richard Holtorf, not the guy with the dog, but the guy on the right under this comically enormous Trump campaign sign. He's the current minority whip in Colorado State House of Representatives, and he epitomizes this idea of Trumpism filtering down to the state level. If his name rings a bell, Holtorf is the guy who was reprimanded 3 years ago for referring to Democratic member of the Colorado House who is black as buckwheat. Now, you may also know him from this story back in January. Quote, Republican State Representative Richard Holtorf, a candidate for Colorado's 4th Congressional District, disclosed Friday that he financed an abortion for one of his 2 girlfriends that he impregnated. I respected her rights and actually gave her money to help her through her important, critical time so she could live her best life, he said. I respected her rights. What about the rights of women who were not impregnated by Richard Holtorf? He was asked about that in a truly excellent 47-minute interview this week by Kyle Clark of Denver's NBC affiliate KUSA. And in answering Kyle Clark's questions, he showed his mastery of 3 different Trump traits: deflection, projection, and, of course, hypocrisy.
If abortion was the best choice for your girlfriend, why try to deny that choice to other women?
So let me give you some context about that situation, because I'm a pro-life Catholic, and I believe everyone should choose life. Now, if you listen to my presentation on the House floor, did you listen to it?
I did, in fact. I just quoted from it.
Okay, so what was the major theme, and what did I had to repeat probably 20 times?
In
Hold on, let me help you.
Oh, I thought you were asking me a question.
No, go ahead.
In fairness, your logic was a bit scattered in that speech. What I'm asking you about is the fact that you said that you respected your girlfriend's right to an abortion and then gave her money to help her through an important time to live her best life.
You did exactly what I did.
But yet you've tried.
Now, I want to jump into the excellent interrogation by that journalist, Kyle Clark, and what he is doing here to reiterate what Holtorf just said. Quote, you did exactly what I did. You deflected. Now, it's a bold choice to flat out admit you are not answering the question. Remember, deflection, projection, and hypocrisy. Let's go back to the tape.
Why is an abortion good for your girlfriend, bad for other women? That's my question. Simple question.
Okay, so you deflected, and you did a good job of it, by the way. So the major theme of that presentation, if you listen to it, and I want you to listen to it again, choose life. 20 times I said, choose life. Now, there are times when that choice can't be made or it's complicated, particularly for the woman, okay? And I understand that.
Quote, there are times when that choice can't be made or it's complicated, particularly for the woman, and I understand that. This is a Trump Republican who has voted against abortion rights before, and he will do it again if he can. You may think we just watched a political conversion in real time, but no. Keep watching as Richard Holtorf seems to argue for reproductive rights, but concludes there's nothing wrong with him legislating those rights away from women.
I'm a pro-life person. I think you should try to choose life every time. But there are exceptions. And there are times when you need abortion. Abortion is a medical procedure.
Is one of the exceptions when Richard Holtorf's the father?
No, it is not. It's not about me. Don't personalize it and make it about me. It's not.
You told the story on the House floor.
That doesn't matter.
Okay.
That doesn't matter. Okay. That's a story.
Okay.
That's not that important. What's more important is the policy. The policy.
It's not. I mean, it was her life and her story. I mean, and you shared
and that's it.
Publicly.
And it's her life.
And it's
her life, and it was her choice, not my choice. It wasn't my choice. Right. It was her choice.
It was her choice. And as we've established, you've also sought to legislate that choice away from other women. And that's the thing that I was asking you to grapple with.
Deflection, projection, hypocrisy. It's not just Donald Trump or the Republicans on Capitol Hill. Trump Republicans are on school boards. They're in state houses. They want to be the future of their party. And I mentioned that Richard Holtorf is a candidate for the United States Congress. He's, in fact, running in a district where one of his primary opponents is current U.S. Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, who, thanks to redistricting, is running in a new district. It's a highly conservative rural district, and this Republican primary, scheduled for later this month on June 25th, has been dubbed a Wild West primary by Colorado media. Haltorf is going to have to out-Trump Lauren Boebert if he wants to win, but he seems to have the right skills. And he's got that giant Trump campaign sign that we can't forget about. That's why Democrats have a plan to stop Trump Republicans like Richard Haltorf. Joining us now to talk about it is Heather Williams. She is the president of the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee. Heather, it's great to have you with us. I mean, we focused on that single state level Republican to explain how Trumpism is trying to find root at the local level. Perhaps it already has to some extent, and how that's where many of the MAGA Republicans now in Congress got their start, and where they can have a very severe impact on many of the most pressing issues in our country. Expand on that.
Absolutely. Pleasure being here with you tonight. And I think you're absolutely right in the hypocrisy that we are seeing with Republicans at the state level all across the country. The Supreme Court has made it clear that the issues that we care most about, our rights, are being decided in the states. And it is these hypocritical Republicans who are playing an active role in it. But I have to say, like, all hope is not lost. Our work here at DLCC is to we represent the party committee responsible for this ballot level. And our work is to make sure that we've got strong candidates running across the country in really important communities, talking about what they will do when they get to their state house, expanding our rights, protecting our communities. And I think that that is really critical as we move through this election into November.
In addition to the funding candidates who are already on the ballot, how are you using resources to recruit would-be candidates into this fraught political environment? Are you having a hard time recruiting candidates?
It's such a great question. We are seeing enthusiasm to run for office all across the country. In these key battleground states that are also key state legislative battlegrounds, we are seeing candidates run in every corner of these states. This is incredible because these candidates whom come out of their communities, who are teachers and coaches and deeply rooted in these communities, are showing up to run for office. They are knocking on voters' doors and having very real conversations about what the Democratic Party values are, about how they will lead in their state house, and how they will protect people's rights, fundamental rights that we hold near and dear. And it is critically important that these races are funded, that they have the resources necessary to tell their stories, and that people are getting involved. And so if folks want to know more, they can head to dlcc.org. But we have an incredible slate of candidates, and we're really proud of where we start this election season.
Well, that's certainly good news. Heather, we're going to continue this conversation. I'm sorry we're out of time, but it is something we're going to keep tracking as we get closer to Election Day. I greatly appreciate you joining us this evening. Heather Williams.